Hello, my dear friend, and welcome to the Spiritually Engineered Podcast, where we take a deep dive into the human experience from a spiritual perspective. Come on in, and I invite you to stay. All right. So for this episode, I really want to get into something really raw. I mean, when am I not always trying to get it, going going raw with my talks and stuff, so to speak. And so I was having an interesting conversation with some of my colleagues at work, and the topic of intimacy came up. And definitely there's been this awareness of where we at as a society. And I believe a lot of the state of our society and where we are, American society specifically, I can't speak for others because I'm not currently there or have any experience to back it up. But at least in American society, there is this epidemic of like being touch starved. There's this connection starved, or another way to put it, a sense of loneliness. And I believe that our societal concepts of intimacy play a huge role into why there are a lot of people who truly feel lonely and thus get into depression and all types of things as a result. And so when I was having a conversation with my colleagues, I was like, yeah, for me, I've definitely learned over the years how in some sense how nuanced and how many layers there are that there is to intimacy. Because when it comes to like going back to the societal understanding of, or this this concept of intimacy, it's seen as black and white. It's either sexual or it's platonic or nothing. It's just like intimacy, sexual, not intimacy, okay, then it's platonic. But it's like to even conceptualize, like, well, what if I can be intimate with someone platonically? And it's just, can you even consider that? Like, consider this. When was the last time you gave someone a hug or held someone by the hands who isn't necessarily a loved one, or someone, a family, a friend, maybe a stranger? When was the last time you gave a stranger a hug or held someone by the hands? Perhaps you may have experiences that would close you off for such an opportunity or interaction, and I'm sure perhaps you may have valid experiences that justifies perhaps your own personal view of just how you connect with people and things like that, and your boundaries when it comes to intimacy. And it's all valid and important. I think it's an important thing to have that in mind as I'm talking about and exploring intimacy beyond just, the black and white label, it's sexual type of thing, because it's not always. Another way to put it is sexuality is intimacy, but intimacy is not always sexual. And I remember from our conversation with my colleagues, culture started coming up. And it's interesting how oftentimes minorities, I'm speaking from my experience as a Latino American here, Hispanic, and then of course one of my colleagues was black, who's sharing from his experiences, is like it seems to be a lot of stigma and judgment and a lot of divisiveness in trying to connect between man to man. It's like there's like a stigma to that. And I think a huge part of that, especially in my experiences, is that, any idea, even just thinking about the idea of, let's say me as a straight guy being intimate with another guy, that would be seen as something, no, that's gay, that's, oh my God, that's this and that, or all the slurs you can think of, right? But I've come to understand that a lot of that a lot of that kind of language, it really is deep rooted in fear and a lot of homophobia. I'll be honest. I mean, especially have been had people growing up in my family and like friends and stuff that were very like that, you know. And it isn't to say, and I'm not saying this to try to shame people. Like if you feel a certain way about things, that's how you feel. I'm not here to try to like wanting to change or trying to prove anything, but at least I want to be able to just provide a perspective to help open you up to something different that you would have thought possible. Because I think it's very important to consider. Because it's the difference between having an open mind or a closed, narrow mind. You know, there's like that powerful quote like, our minds are like a parachute. It can't operate unless it's open. It can't function properly unless it's open. And that rings truth time and time again. And I think that, the more we keep an open perspective, not just in this area, mind you, but in all aspects of life, the more we can access and tap into all the riches that life has for us, that's available to each and every single one of us. How can God ever bestow upon us blessings if we're so closed off to Him? You could say another way. It's important to be able to be open, to be able to receive. I think for me, my journey with intimacy and how it's evolved and has grown really started from when I got introduced into the conscious dance community here in DC, which happened as a result of one of my good and dear friends, one of my good friends, Genevieve. Little shout outs to her if she happens to be listening to this. She was very instrumental in introducing me to this vibrant community where they teach a lot about, they teach by example, mind you, of intimacy, and then also the importance of consent, because especially in these dance spaces, which are different from your typical dancing at the club, because it's more about the sober experience. No drugs, nothing, just being grounded in your own body in the present moment and connecting with whatever's going on in the environment when you're there, and even whatever comes up within yourself, emotions and things. But I think definitely talking about the layers of intimacy, consent is a very important thing, because everybody has their own boundaries. Everybody has a right to set their own boundaries, because everybody is a free agent. They have freedom. They are freedom. They are free. You are free. I am free. And as such, you and I have a right to our own boundaries. It's a matter of principle. And also respect. And I remember an interesting experience I had. I was at a festival earlier in January. It was is this festival that happens every year, Interfusion. I think I talked about it in a previous podcast episode. But anyway, and I remember I did a workshop on Brazilian Zouk. It's a very intimate form of dancing, partner dancing, where you can actually be really close up against your partner, like chest to chest, like really pressed up against. And I actually was in this one workshop. It wasn't an even amount of like guys and girls. So in this case is like there were more guys than there were girls. And so there was a point when I was actually, we were kind of separating ourselves as like the leads and follows, and I purposely made a decision to be a follow. And so naturally I would actually ended up dancing with some of the guys there, and I actually had to be pressed up on them. I mean, talking about like intimacy, right? But like really pressed up against one another, like as our instructor was guiding us into the movements and steps. And I remember I was feeling a lot of type of ways, definitely I felt, I want to get that out of the way and get the obvious, that I definitely felt a little bit uncomfortable. Like, okay, this feels really uncomfortable. I can feel his parts, he can probably feel my parts, like we were that close. But but it was in that moment where I was just allowing myself, okay, I'm having these thoughts, but I still kept myself grounded in that present moment. All right, but let me just connect with my partner here, with this guy here, right? Just another soul. And then just working through with the instructors and just kind of working through the moves, and just kind of, and just being present, just being in that moment, just having that intimate connection. It was a connection that wasn't sexual, but rather it's just like dancing together just for the sake of just moving together. And and taking a step back, even just looking at partner dancing itself, partner dancing is also a powerful teacher. I can see for others, especially I've seen other people share their experiences where it's like they'll have, even if it's like if I was dancing with women, and I've had fair share amount of dancing with women in the conscious dance community. When I've gone into the dances, I definitely had a lot of dances with a lot of women, and a lot of them very intimate. But again, it didn't necessarily. It didn't mean that it was had it led to it being sexual, or it's sexual. Oh, she's into me. All this type of stuff. Even though those stories can come up, though, it's funny how the stories that can come up based on our own concepts, especially around intimacy, and I regret, and not regret. I will admit that even sometimes, for me, it's like, okay, how can I really discern if I'm connecting with somebody, if there's really truly that genuine connection? Because you can't always assume, and it's not wise to always assume. Like, just because, let's say, if you're a man listening to this, just because a woman, warms up to you and you see a side of her that's very vibrant and joyful, and you start to see a side of her radiance, and she shines, you can't always assume that, oh man, she must be into me. Oh my God, this is gonna be a thing or something. It could be that she feels very comfortable enough to just be herself, and you ignite in her something, like, it's something positive that could be said about you if she opens up this part of her to you. And again, I'm saying this as if you're a man listening to this, um, specifically, because that's the experience that I can speak to. So that's why I say this. I'm sure perhaps if you're a woman listening to this, I'm sure perhaps there's some version you can relate to this in some capacity. Maybe perhaps somebody you opened up to, but you weren't feeling them like that. But you felt that intimacy and connection with them. That's just like, I just feel very open around you. I feel comfortable around this individual, perhaps. Maybe you can relate with that, and that's great. Then you probably know what I'm talking about here, and why I think it's important to talk more about intimacy, and really debunking a lot of myths and ignorance around that. And so when I had that experience, dancing with the partner, I mean, aside from that experience, that I had to navigate feeling uncomfortable and just working through that within myself of what's going on. Like I said, a lot of it is, again, deeply rooted in just like this shame, and this is almost like any kind of, again, any kind of connections with like man to man intimacy. It's always seen as something. It's always seen as something like disgusting or something. Like, it's just like, ew. Like, why is this? But I bet you, like, if it was a woman to woman kind of connecting or dancing, not as many guys will kind of bat an eye, be like, oh, that's not disgusting. Oh, that's kind of hot. Yeah. So there's some double standards I also feel like that exists in the world of intimacy in our relationships. And so there's that aspect of of connecting with other people that I think it's really important. It's just that there are a lot of people that really crave deeper connections that don't have to have like an agenda or anything like that, but just connecting for the sake of connecting. Because I think that's a very important need that all of us have within ourselves. And I mean this from a soul perspective. Like, as a soul, as a spirit, we have needs. We have wants and needs. We have desires and we have needs. And the need to connect with people is such an important thing. And especially, like, connecting through physical touch. It's definitely the love language of many, many, many people, and it's something that I definitely respond well to for the most part. Generally, if I'm being honest. Again, it's all a practice here, and I think it's important to just really be, you know, open to just be able to connect with people like that. To be able to be intimate with people that I think can also translate to other areas. Even just like being intimate with life or making love to life. You know, I definitely learned a lot about intimacy as well when I got into the tantra space. And learning about sacred sexuality, because one of the big barriers I think when it comes to like intimacy, and then of course when sex comes to the equation, oh man, it can just open up a can of worms sometimes. But I think there's a lot of religious influence and concepts around that I think contributes to like guilt and shame, and just like I don't know other words to kind of like describe them. Like I'm at a loss for words to try to find, but hopefully with the words that I'm sharing can give you some sense. But like it's never often very positive. It's always like this shame is this sinful bad thing or type of thing. Especially I know for myself growing up that I've internalized that have influenced and have influenced me and have contributed to some experience I've had that in my relationships with people. And it's for that very reason, because of like the religious concepts around that stuff, is what drew me to tantra. And understanding, really connecting. Like I said, connecting, of course, obviously there's the romantic in that aspect, but then really also just like connecting with people. Because I even had an opportunity, even when I went to a tantra retreat. I was with it was a partner based retreat, and I was assigned with somebody, and I had an opportunity to be intimate and connecting with my partner, my female partner. And and again, it wasn't sexual or anything like that, but it was definitely one of those opportunities, just like working together in this program to just better ourselves with that intent of personal growth and healing ourselves and releasing anything that's not serving. All that important good stuff I consider part of God's work, doing God's work, if you were to ask me. So I definitely think that it's important that we start having more conversations about this. And and it definitely gives me hope that I even in the spaces that I'm in, I see that there are a lot of men's circles that are developing and happening, and I think that's such an important thing. You know, because like I said, I feel like there's this loneliness epidemic, in addition to the being touch starved, or being connection starved in our society. That even it can affect that in people who are already in romantic relationships, and the ability for either partners to be able to open themselves up to one another. Because I've definitely witnessed relationships where, and there's always like this stigma of like the man being afraid to open up to the woman because of just being, being made fun of, or not feeling supported in being open and vulnerable. Because in our societies, we're always taught to like, don't, especially as a man, right? Like, what does it mean to be a man? Now we're kind of getting into this area. And there's a lot of toxic views of what it means to be a man. It really, like, what society kind of looks at is really just nothing more of like, or just ingredients of just a broken man. Like, oh, just hide your emotions, don't control your emotions and all this. You have to be the one that is in charge or do all this or da da da. There's a lot of stuff that, again, I just feel like it's not very healthy. It's not very good. It's and so taking another approach at intimacy and having a better relationship with it, and why I think it's important to consider to sit with that and just and even just reflect on like intimacy in your own life, because I think that's a key ingredient to be able to connect deeply with more of the people. Again, without it having to be sexual. And I have to, and it bears repeating, because again, this is like this always like this conscious and unconscious association that always happens all the time. It's not always the case. So I want to keep repeating it. So I'm speaking to your psyche so that way it's like really reprogramming it and really having a more open perspective here. If you want, of course, but I just, it's just those influences. And then of course I think the where I think is truly important as well too, on a topic of intimacy and stuff. Because of course, I've already mentioned just the aspect of being intimate with other people, but then what about being intimate with yourself? You know, and yes, of course, there's the obvious aspect of the sexual component to it. Like, oh my God, drum rolls, masturbation, type of thing. You know, and even that can have like a taboo as well too, like from society. And again, all of it stemming from, I believe, is from just religious concepts of just just that religious concepts about pleasure and stuff, and just what about enjoying yourself, having your own time, because I have my own me time, and I think it's a healthy thing for people to engage in that in a healthy way, of course. Because the way I see it is like self pleasure is not inherently bad, just often misused. You know, and I think that's the piece that gets really exaggerated, and it just starts becoming this like, oh, see, this is the problem, this is that, and then becomes misused, and then all this, and of course, with pornography and a lot of stuff, and then of course not, and even beyond that, but just the over hyper sexualization of things. That's also what's contributed to the why any form of intimacy is like, nope, sexual, sexual, because we're such, because American society, again, I'm speaking of American society here, right? If you're from another country and you probably, if you relate to this in your country, okay, cool, then you get me. But in our American society, it's just so hypersexual, everything. And it's like really getting into this place of just like having a balanced way of just a healthy way of just looking at um, connection, you know? Because when it comes to intimacy and sexuality, I think the deeper root essence of what we're trying to get at here is connection. So it's like connecting with others and connecting with yourself, you know? And I think for me, I had a recent experience of in my own exploration within myself and my connection and stuff, of getting into uh, prostate massage. Sticking up in the back door. Again, something that in of itself is like a stigma. I don't know. I'm sure if I have loved ones or friends listening to this, they might think some type of way. And you know what? Hey, you have a right to think whatever you want, but it's just like, I'm in a place of just wanting to really expand and open my mind up to things, and just like, and just being careful of any limitations and fear-based limitations that come up. But just like for me, in this case of like engaging with this like prostate massage, I mean, that's something that's been very healing for me, because it's like I had to kind of work through some stuff there, had to unpack. And I do appreciate my guides being there close by, supporting me in this, and just taking this opportunity of being super vulnerable in this practice, working with this little prostate massager that I had purchased. Um, all this so that I can enhance my own intimacy with myself, that I feel like that can also enhance my intimacy and my connections with people, no matter who they are. It doesn't matter, even if it's for a brief moment or for a longer period of time. It doesn't matter. Just having that authentic, deep connections with people, no matter where I'm at, where I go, showing up in the through all of it, the good, bad, and the ugly type of thing. And it's just again, just going back to just like our society and what it means to be a man and stuff like that. It's just it's not very healthy. Like, I feel like we can do so much better, and I feel like we are in a better place, and just based on the conversations, the people that I've talked to, really just gives me hope that we're moving towards a better direction. you know and I'll say this too. One of the things that I've learned about you know engaging in the prostate practice, because there are a lot of health benefits to it, that I've researched and looked into, and it's just like that really just also enhances just the ability, I think, to enjoy more. because especially as a man, like when it comes to engaging in like me time, right, masturbating, there's always like this need to like have to rush to orgasm and ejaculation type of thing, but there's never like that window of time permission granted to just like to enjoy. Even more so in this context of like doing like a prostate massage, it's not often there's a man that's be willing to open to receive, right? But like there's this saying, don't don't dish out what you can't take. In this case, you know, people. I know some people may not agree with this, but I mean, I think it's a powerful thing that I've come to learn, and to to be a man and to be able to learn how to receive in that way. I think it's a very powerful thing. I definitely know there are a lot of women that find that very attractive, for sure. And so, and I've just been like, going in this exploration so that I can just work on that connection with myself, so that I can have more deeper connections with other people. And it's just amazing, just like with little tiny shifts that I've noticed when I observe people or when I'm interacting with people. What came up, I noticed some things. And yeah, I think intimacy, sexuality is a lot to unpack there. But this is just kind of this episode. I just wanted to like just talk about at least some of the stuff, the recent stuff that's been coming up for me, that I think it's important to to share with you. Something as a conversation starter that you can take with your friends. Not necessarily your friends, loved ones, or even strangers. Um, I think it's important to really take this exploratory attitude when it comes to intimacy. When it comes to sexuality, of course, that's obviously it's a different aspect to it. And so again, even though it's funny, I just started talking about intimacy sexually. I mean, again, it's a part of it, of course. It's a part of it, but again, it's not always that. Intimacy is not always sexuality. And of course, so I remember where I kind of veered off for a second. Um, but I what was it? So where I veered off was when I was talking about you know practicing intimacy with yourself. So there's obviously the sexual aspect to it, right? Of just and really looking at that like it's a healthy thing, and but also recognizing that it's important of doing it responsibly, not misusing, right? Not getting into lust type of situation. But then there's other ways of just like massage, dancing with yourself, writing messages or love letters to yourself, like really being your own like soulmate, right? And again, this isn't like this also applies whether you're in a relationship or if you're single. It doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, all you have is yourself. When all is said and done, even let's say to the extreme, like when your life on earth ends, what's going to be left is you with yourself for all eternity. And that's not going to change whatsoever. That's reality. So I just wanted to at least that share some of that, those little tidbits there, and just at least just the stuff that's been coming up. I think that it's important to consider. By no means I'm not saying like do what I do, anything like that, but I'm just kind of giving some examples of stuff, at least what I've been applying in my life and what I've been doing, and perhaps maybe you might gain some inspirations, be able to connect. It's like how can you invite more intimacy? Let's say for starters, how can you invite more intimacy with yourself in your life at this time? And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be sexual. It can be with yourself. Like I said, I don't see anything wrong with it. I think it's healthy as long as it's being used, in moderation with balance, and it's just like a lot of things, like many things. And then, of course, how can you invite more intimacy, connecting with other people? Um, Again, that's if it's something that you want, right? Because that's also that factor of like, if people want it, and I think we all do deep down within ourselves, within us, we do crave it, we desire it, but then we get so caught up in other people's concepts, again, society concepts, other concepts of other people that really can just um, what's the word? It can maybe like skew our desires, maybe, which can happen too. Sometimes we can have desires that aren't genuinely our own, but could be somebody else's, or it could be something, I don't know. It's just not genuinely ours, basically, because that can happen too because of just our spiritual nature and our spiritual sensitivity to the environment, to other people, empaths, if you will. So with those questions that I shared, I encourage you to just explore intimacy, because when I feel like when you explore that, and I think a good place to start is with yourself. You don't necessarily have to start with other people per se, but I think whatever that looks like with how can you express more intimacy in your relationship with yourself, because that is very the most fundamental, most basic and essential relationship that you have in your life. You have a lot of relationships, but the most important one that takes priority, in my opinion, is your relationship with yourself. Honor that, you take care of that, having this beautiful dance with yourself, then there's that beautiful inside out energy, that influence that can happen. Where it's like now all of a sudden you start to notice things in your outer environment. Things that are like catch your eye, or all of a sudden things maybe start to become more magical. Things start to open up, and it's like excitement fills the air, and it's just like this beauty perhaps you start to behold more often. You start to notice and just get into this beautiful connection with everything that's nothing short of just joyfulness, or being joyful, ecstasy, if you will, but natural ecstasy. Not to confuse with the drug. We're not talking about the drugs here. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about the actual natural high to life, which is pretty much kind of like I've been riding on at this point in my life. I really just drink. I don't smoke. I would smoke occasionally before, but I just kind of left that, and I drink super, super occasionally. But for the most part, I'm all about being grounded and just having a sober, joyful life, and to embrace everything. And I think it's just like when you can do that, from practicing intimacy all around, everywhere, right? And I mean, like, also, like, yeah, I'm washing dishes. I'm gonna get intimate here, washing these dishes. Oh, I'm gonna scrub these dishes. Ooh, clean up all the gunk and make sure it's squeaky clean. Um, just to give an example. I mean, all this to say, it's just like when I started, opening myself up to all of this, it's just been amazing. It's been an amazing journey of just what I've experienced with people, and the kind of stuff and blessings that have come into my life, and the connections that have come up that has been really nourishing, have been super helpful, and it's just, yeah, I think that word nourishing has been very like chef's kiss right there. So yeah, so I'll just leave it there. I encourage you to just think about, what are the ways you can practice more intimacy in your life? How can you invite more? And then also, like, being aware of perhaps what are some of the obstacles, because I will say this, I am aware of, and wanted to kind of shed light that there are reasons why people can kind of close themselves up, men and women, for many reasons, understandable, and and it's by their own right, whatever reasons that they have, right, to close themselves off. But if you're in that situation where you find yourself more closed off because of past experiences, well, I just want to say, I see you, I hear you, and I understand you. You know, and it's like, sometimes, being able to open yourself up to, like, intimacy, and just in that way, it's not always easy. But I definitely think it's worth it to be able to open yourself up, to just, which can be little each day. It doesn't have to be extreme, you know. It's just like just little bit each day, just taking those tiny moments and steps and opportunities whenever they show up, to be able to connect with somebody for a brief moment, for a couple minutes, hours or long term. It doesn't matter. But it's like showing up anywhere in life as a person of just deep intimacy and connection, groundedness, and just embracing everything and everyone that comes through. You know, I think those are ingredients of someone of who's very secure inside, and I think that's something that we can all build towards. We can all build. So, but again, if you have any challenges, anything that's come up for you, I encourage you to just look at. There's a plethora of tools. I mean, there's some tools that could be a starting point in your journey. In my show notes as well too, and just kind of holding space for anything that comes up for you. If it's like a past experience or something, and really perhaps talk it out with a friend or something to just work it through. And this is why also again like the intimacy is such an important thing, because the need to be able to find people we can open up to and talk about what's going on in our lives, because it's through that intimacy as well that allows us to help one another, to meet us where we are. How can I allow how can someone meet me where I'm at if I'm not allowing them, if I'm not allowing them in or closing them off, type of thing. And like I said, no one's perfect. Like I definitely had my moments when I felt closed off. Trust me. And like I said, and in those moments, it's okay. It's no big deal. That's why I say it's like it's really a practice, and to just to practice, you know, sharing that, having that intimacy, that deeply layered, of intimacy. That's not always sexual, not always sexual, but just having that deep conscious connection with people and with everything. It's all part of it's part of who we are as a soul. It's what we are. Is that the connection, that what do they say, the being one with all things. I think that's a huge part of what I'm talking about here, is being one with all things and what that's about. So taking it beyond the perhaps the woo woo whoa, understanding of it, to like, oh, the most practical and more deepened version of it, a deeper understanding way of looking at it. So in whichever way you can engage and practice it, explore. I think this is, if anything, just explore. Any curiosities, explore it. Don't shut yourself off from that, because you don't want to close yourself off, because that can lead to dis-ease and depression. Like I said, all the stuff that we're seeing in our society is a result of people, you know, suppression of their emotions, suppression of their desires, suppressions of their connections, because of what? A lot of things that are taboo, and not to mention, like, a lot of other stuff happening as well too, like the um like, it's just a lot of nuances out there and a lot of justifications, but again, it's just like really, it takes it falls on each of us individually, taking responsibility of what we can do for ourselves to right our own relationships with intimacy, despite the experiences and even some traumas, I'm sure, are probably in there. I'm sure, but it's like it's our own personal responsibility to work through them. And so, use whatever resources you have available to you. Let this episode just be a stepping stone to help guide you further in where you need to move in your life. you know like I said, I'm just sharing experiences here. I'm just a guy, just another soul, kind of sharing where I'm at right now, where I'm going through, just to help inspire. I care about that a lot. So this, and you could say too, this is my way of being intimate with you, the listener. That's part of why I'm doing this podcast, because I can reach and touch the hearts of many people and being intimate this way. But of course, nothing's gonna always beat like an actual face-to-face interaction as well too. Like that, nothing ever beats that, because it's like the real deal, like right there, raw, right in your face, right in front of you, right, physically. But I do believe intimacy can be expressed from a distance as well too. So that's part of what I infuse in these words to you for these episodes. So I share these with love, And I just want to say, I'll just up and say it, I love you. I do it because I love you. I don't care who you are, where you came from, what you believe. I love you for who you are and what you are. And so if you made it at this point in the episode, thank you so much for your time and attention. And I hope there's something you could take away from and something perhaps you can take action on. Anything, one small step, anything. Then I know I've done my part. And so this has been another episode of Spiritual Engineered. I'm your host, Alvin Cepeda, signing out. And as always, take care, my dear friend.